Every night from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., she sat behind her microphone and computer screens, tracking dozens of drivers across the metropolitan area, her voice the lifeline that kept them safe and connected. Until the night she couldn't protect them through the radio anymore and had to step out from behind the desk to do what she'd been trained for decades ago. Welcome to True Human Tales. Before we begin this powerful story of hidden courage and nighttime heroism, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. Metro City Taxi operated out of a converted warehouse in the industrial district where the rent was cheap and the location convenient for drivers starting their shifts from all corners of the metropolitan area. The building itself was unremarkable. Concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, and the perpetual smell of coffee and cigarettes that accumulated wherever people worked long hours under stress. But inside those walls, a small army of dispatchers coordinated the movement of over 200 taxis across a city that never truly slept. The dispatch center occupied the building's second floor, accessed by a narrow staircase that creaked with every footstep. The main room housed a dozen workstations arranged in a semicircle, each equipped with multiple computer monitors, radio equipment, and direct phone lines to emergency services. The setup resembled a scaled-down version of an air traffic control center, with dispatchers tracking vehicle movements on digital maps while managing the constant flow of pickup requests, traffic updates, and driver check-ins. Helen Rodriguez had worked the overnight shift for 15 years, occupying Station 7 near the back corner where the coffee machine and emergency supplies were located. At 59, Helen moved with the economical grace of someone who'd learned to conserve energy during long shifts, her graying hair always pulled back in a practical ponytail, her sweater chosen for warmth rather than style. Her workspace was organized with military precision, headset positioned for optimal comfort, reference materials within easy reach, and emergency contact numbers memorized rather than written down. The overnight shift was different from daytime operations. Between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., the city transformed into a more unpredictable environment where taxi drivers encountered everything from late-night partiers to people running from situations they couldn't handle alone. Helen's voice became the constant that guided drivers through those uncertain hours, providing not just coordinates and pickup instructions, but also the reassurance that someone reliable was watching over their movements. Helen knew every street in the metropolitan area, every shortcut that could save time during rush periods, and every neighborhood where extra caution was warranted after dark. Her radio calls were models of efficiency and professionalism, providing drivers with exactly the information they needed without unnecessary chatter that could clog communication channels. But beneath that professional demeanor was a warmth that made drivers feel connected to something larger than just a job. Regular drivers had developed genuine relationships with Helen over the years, sharing stories about their families, their dreams, and their concerns about working in an industry that required constant interaction with strangers. Miguel Santos, who'd been driving for Metro City for 8 years, always requested Helen's shift because her traffic updates helped him maximize his earnings during the most lucrative overnight hours. Sarah Chen, a part-time driver putting herself through nursing school, appreciated how Helen would find her rides near the hospital where she studied between shifts. Newer drivers quickly learned that Helen's guidance could mean the difference between a profitable night and a dangerous one. She had an intuitive sense for reading situations over the radio, detecting stress or concern in drivers' voices before they fully articulated problems. Her quick thinking had prevented dozens of incidents over the years, from directing drivers away from developing street violence to coordinating with police when situations required official intervention. What made Helen exceptional wasn't just her geographic knowledge or customer service skills, though both were considerable, but her ability to maintain situational awareness across an entire metropolitan area while managing multiple communications channels simultaneously. She could track 30 active drivers, process incoming pickup requests, monitor traffic conditions, and maintain contact with emergency services without ever appearing overwhelmed or losing track of critical details. Helen's incident reports were legendary among management for their thoroughness and accuracy. She documented everything from vehicle maintenance issues that could compromise driver safety to passenger behavior that warranted blacklisting from company services. Her observations had contributed to policy changes that improved both driver security and customer satisfaction, making Metro City Taxi one of the more respected operations in a highly competitive industry. What drivers and management didn't know was that Helen's exceptional coordination skills and threat assessment abilities had been developed in environments far more challenging than taxi dispatch. Her ability to track multiple moving assets, coordinate rapid response to developing situations, and maintain clear communication under pressure came from 18 years with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, where she'd specialized in surveillance operations and tactical coordination. Special Agent Helen Rodriguez had served from 1982 to 2000, working everything from undercover infiltration of arms, trafficking networks, to coordination of multi-agency raids on organized crime operations. Her official ATF record listed her specialty as surveillance operations and communications coordination, but the classified portions revealed a career spent tracking some of the most dangerous criminal enterprises operating within American borders. Helen had been part of the teams that developed modern surveillance protocols for federal law enforcement, working behind the scenes during operations that dismantled international arms, smuggling rings, narcotics distribution networks, and domestic terrorism cells. She'd coordinated communications during raids that required split-second timing across multiple locations, and her voice had been the lifeline that kept agents connected during operations where radio silence could mean the difference between success and catastrophe. Her transition to civilian life had been carefully managed by bureau supervisors who understood that agents with her communication and coordination expertise needed to stay connected to work that required similar skills. The Metro City Taxi position wasn't random. It was therapeutic, allowing Helen to use her abilities for legitimate business operations rather than criminal investigations, for helping honest workers rather than tracking dangerous suspects. The taxi company's operations manager knew Helen was former federal law enforcement, but had no idea of the scope of her experience with ATF. Her job application listed her background as Federal Communications, Transportation Security, which seemed perfectly suited for a dispatch position that required managing complex logistics and emergency coordination. The weapon she was licensed to carry was assumed to be standard protection for overnight workers in an industrial area. What they didn't know was that Helen's workstation held more than just taxi dispatch equipment. The locked drawer in her desk contained detailed maps of criminal activity patterns across the metropolitan area, information she'd compiled during her first year on the job by cross-referencing driver incident reports with federal crime databases she still had access to through professional contacts. Her headset could monitor police frequencies in addition to taxi communications, and her computer system included backup protocols for coordinating with law enforcement that went far beyond standard dispatch procedures. For 15 years, Helen had found peace in her overnight routine. Helping honest drivers make a living had gradually replaced the stress of tracking criminal enterprises, and the steady rhythm of dispatch operations had allowed her to heal from years of hypervigilance and threat assessment. Her greatest satisfaction came from sending drivers home safely at the end of their shifts, knowing that her coordination had contributed to their success and security. November the 8th was a typical Wednesday night during the pre-holiday season when business picked up but hadn't yet reached the chaos of New Year's Eve operations. Helen had 37 active drivers on the road, handling everything from airport runs to late-night restaurant pickups. The radio chatter was steady but manageable, and Helen was in her element, coordinating efficient routes, providing traffic updates, and maintaining the constant communication flow that kept the overnight operation running smoothly. At 2:23 a.m., during the quieter period when most legitimate businesses were closed and only emergency services maintained full operations, Helen noticed an unusual pattern in her radio traffic. 3 different drivers had reported suspicious activity in the industrial district where the dispatch office was located. Vehicles with out-of-state plates conducting what appeared to be surveillance of commercial buildings, men in expensive clothing asking questions about business operations in an area where expensive clothing was rare after midnight. Helen's threat assessment protocols, dormant for years but never fully disabled, began processing danger indicators with automatic precision. The pattern suggested organized criminal activity rather than random street crime, and the focus on commercial buildings in the industrial district indicated potential robbery targets that would have significant cash on hand. The Metro City Taxi Office collected daily receipts from all drivers at the end of each shift, meaning that by 6 a.m., thousands of dollars in cash would be secured in the office safe. Helen continued her normal dispatch duties without changing her professional demeanor, but her awareness shifted into the heightened state that had once made her invaluable to federal surveillance operations. She quietly activated backup communication protocols that would maintain driver coordination even if the main dispatch center was compromised, and she began tracking the suspicious vehicles through reports from her drivers positioned across the area. At 2:47 a.m., Helen's suspicions were confirmed when driver 23, Miguel Santos, reported that two men in dark clothing had approached his taxi while he was parked outside an all-night diner, asking specific questions about Metro City Taxi's overnight operations, shift changes, and cash handling procedures. The questions were too detailed and too focused to be casual curiosity, and Miguel's years of experience had taught him to recognize when people were gathering intelligence rather than seeking transportation. Helen realized she was monitoring the reconnaissance phase of what federal investigators called a cash business robbery, an operation designed to target companies that handled significant amounts of cash during vulnerable overnight hours when police response times were longer and witness presence was minimal. The Metro City Taxi Office was perfect for such an operation: isolated location, known cash accumulation, and minimal security beyond whatever protection the overnight dispatchers could provide. As Helen coordinated with her drivers to gather additional intelligence about the suspicious activity, she noticed movement in the parking lot below her window. 3 vehicles had positioned themselves strategically around the building, one blocking the main entrance, one covering the rear exit, and one positioned to monitor the staircase that provided the only access to the dispatch center. The coordination suggested military-style planning rather than opportunistic street crime. At 2:54 a.m., Helen heard the sound of the main door being forced open, followed by footsteps on the staircase that meant someone was ascending toward the dispatch center, with purposes that definitely weren't legitimate business. That's when Helen stopped being a taxi dispatcher and became an ATF agent again. Helen's hand moved to the locked drawer in her desk with practiced efficiency, retrieving the Glock 22 that had been her service weapon throughout her federal career. The weapon came into her hand with the familiar weight of an old friend, safety disengaged with muscle memory that transcended the years since she'd last needed it for operational purposes. Helen's other hand activated the emergency alert system that would notify police while maintaining radio contact with her drivers, who were now potential witnesses to whatever was about to unfold. The dispatch center's layout provided excellent defensive positioning for someone with tactical training. Helen's workstation was positioned to control both the staircase access and the main floor area, and her years of overnight shifts had given her intimate knowledge of every sightline, exit route, and communication option in the immediate environment. The building's concrete construction would contain gunfire, while the elevated position provided tactical advantage over anyone attempting to control the space. The armed men who entered the dispatch center had expected to encounter frightened civilian employees who would comply with demands for cash and cooperation. What they encountered instead was return fire delivered with precision that spoke of decades of training in environments where hesitation meant casualties. Helen's first shots were immediate and accurate, targeting the lead gunman as he attempted to control the staircase access that would trap other dispatchers in the building. Helen's tactical communication training allowed her to coordinate with responding police units while maintaining suppressive fire against the remaining intruders. Her radio skills, developed through years of federal operations, enabled her to provide real-time intelligence about suspect positions, weapons, and intentions that helped law enforcement respond with appropriate force and tactics. The radio system that had been designed to coordinate taxi movements became the lifeline that coordinated emergency response, with Helen's voice guiding police units through the building layout while simultaneously directing her drivers to safety positions away from the developing situation. Her overnight drivers, who had come to trust Helen's judgment implicitly, followed her emergency instructions without question, creating a security perimeter that prevented the situation from expanding beyond the immediate area. Within 12 minutes, the threat was neutralized, the building was secure, and the Metro City taxi operation was safe from an attack that could have crippled both the business and the drivers who depended on it for their livelihood. Helen's immediate threat assessment and tactical response had prevented what could have become a deadly robbery that would have impacted an entire community of working families. The investigation revealed the full scope of the planned operation, a coordinated robbery designed to target the taxi company's accumulated cash receipts during the vulnerable overnight hours when security was minimal and police response was delayed by distance. The criminals had researched the company's operations, cash handling procedures, and personnel schedules with the thoroughness of professionals planning a bank robbery. What they hadn't researched was Helen Rodriguez. The ATF agents who interviewed Helen were surprised but not shocked to encounter a former federal agent working in civilian dispatch operations. Bureau records confirmed her identity and service record: 18 years of classified operations, commendations for surveillance work that couldn't be publicly acknowledged, and expertise that had been considered too valuable to lose even in retirement. The media wanted to interview her about her transition from federal service to taxi dispatch, about the psychology of retirement from law enforcement, about the moment when her two careers had intersected. Helen politely declined all interview requests, preferring to let the official statements speak for themselves while she returned to the work that had given her peace. Metro City Taxi resumed operations the following night with enhanced security and a new understanding of the woman who worked Station 7. Helen returned to her workstation with the same professional demeanor she'd always shown, coordinating drivers and managing communications with the same patient efficiency that had made her invaluable to overnight operations. The only visible change was a small security upgrade to the dispatch center and a discreet commendation letter from company management thanking her for extraordinary service during a security incident. Helen had requested that it not mention specific details, preferring to be remembered for the thousands of safe trips she'd coordinated rather than the one night when her other skills had been needed. Because some people serve their community in ways that aren't always visible, and when their official service ends, they find new ways to use their skills for legitimate purposes. Helen had spent 18 years tracking dangerous criminals and 15 years helping honest workers navigate the challenges of earning a living in an unpredictable city. The difference was that now everyone got to go home safely, guided by a voice they trusted, but a background they'd never suspected. So now I ask you, have you ever met someone like Helen? Someone who seemed like just a friendly taxi dispatcher until the moment they revealed the depths of their expertise and dedication? Someone whose daily presence made you feel safer without knowing why? Tell me in the comments where are you watching from today and share their story with us. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us make sure they are. We publish human stories that matter every single week. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story. And remember, sometimes the person guiding you through the radio knows more about protection than you could ever imagine.